Coming up on this week's Eastern Conference recap edition of Locked On NHL, Patrick Kane has made his decision. He's joining another Original Six team. What kind of impact will he have in Detroit? We'll discuss that. Plus, the best team in the NHL for much of this young season has been the Boston Bruins, but now they're losers of 3 straight. Is there a reason to be concerned, or is this just the ebbs and flows of an NHL season? All that and more coming up on today's edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Your team every day.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On NHL. I'm Ross Levitan from Locked On Senators alongside Mike DiStefano, who hosts Locked On Maple Leafs with Dave Morisuti. Today's Wednesday, November 29th, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Game Time, the official ticketing app of Locked On NHL. On today's show, plenty to get to. It's Eastern Conference recap edition. Mikey, the vibes in Ontario, though, are at an all-time low right now, both in Ottawa and Toronto. How are you feeling in Leafland? I mean, I know they're still finding ways to get points, get a couple wins.
Yeah.
5 regulation wins in 20 games, though.
It's not great, obviously. You'd prefer, them to be, assert their dominance a little more and take care of business in the original 60 minutes. But, I mean, the team is still, in a pretty good spot. And I don't know if you saw the game last night between Toronto and Florida, but that was one of the wackiest finishes I've ever seen in my life. Half of the building was already to their cars. You had Joseph Woll was already literally in the locker room with his gloves off because they thought that it was over. The shootout goal was called a goal on the ice, and then lo and behold, they actually went and reviewed the shootout goal, found out that it was double touched by the shooter, so they wiped that off of the board. They bring the teams back out from the locker room, and the Leafs end up winning the game in the following round. Noah Gregor, who scored the only goal in regulation, then scored the game winner in the shootout. It was a wacky finish for that team. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, the night before, the Florida Panthers had a wacky finish in Ottawa where there were like 6 players left on the bench. Had you ever heard something like that where the ref says, everybody on the ice, 10-minute misconducts?
Among other penalties. It was just absurd. The Florida Panthers have gotten themselves in a couple of wacky situations as they do this Ontario swing. But the hockey's been good around the NHL, obviously, and I'm happy that we finally got a resolution to the Patrick Kane situation. I know we'll get to that in a little bit here, but in terms of Toronto, I think the win against Florida should put them in the right direction. I saw some things that I liked in that game. If they can, shore up the defense and goaltending as per usual, I think that they'll be okay.
For more on the Toronto Maple Leafs, go download Locked On Leafs wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to see a miserable group of individuals, maybe Locked On Senators is for you, where we're trying to make light of what's been a pretty bumpy start for the Senators. The Sens have only played 17 games this year. That's just the qualm that I still have. They have 6 games in hand on multiple teams right now. That will extend to 7 by the end of the month, and then it's coming fast and furious. But alas, I digress. The big news of the week, Patrick Kane has finally made a decision. It was 5 teams, then it was 3, and now he's reuniting with Alex DeBrincat in Detroit. Steve Yzerman signs the 35-year-old Patrick Kane to a 1-year, $2.75 million contract where it's a low risk, but man, this guy's only 1 season removed from 92 points. And Steve Yzerman saying in his initial press conference, Mike, that he thinks that's more the type of player that they're going to get from Kane versus the one we saw split time between the Hawks and Rangers last year.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's the case. I think the league's better off if Showtime is, the best player on the ice most nights. But I don't know, man, like hip resurfacing surgery is no joke. Like it's claimed a lot of NHLers over the past few seasons. Like, that's a big reason why Nick Backstrom had to bow out of the season, and his, return to hockey is up in the air. We've seen this happen to Ryan Kessler, who didn't return. Carl Hagelin forced to retire this summer after undergoing that surgery. And then I think Ed Jovanovski, too, had tried to come back. I think he played like 26 games or something like that, and then was forced to retire as well. So the track record's not great coming back from this type of hip surgery. I hope that he can buck the trend. Like, this is a star player in the NHL. He has been now for well over a decade, and I mean, I was a little surprised to see him sign with Detroit. Like, I understand there's the link between him and DeBrincat, where those two were stars and played really well with each other in Chicago. But I don't know, like, signing a 1-year deal with the Red Wings, like, this isn't a team that I expect to compete for a Stanley Cup. Did that surprise you that he chose Detroit?
I think that when Steve Yzerman calls you, you listen. I really think that does have more to say than others.
Why
Like,
though? Like,
'cause
why?
he's a legend. What do you mean why?
Dude, there's tons of legends in the game. Joe Saxic's a legend as well. I didn't see him take any calls with Colorado.
Well, that's because
Brendan
Chris
Shanahan's a
McFarland.
legend. Shanny's a legend.
Those are
Shanny,
presidents.
he could have called still.
Yeah, they could have called. I think there's also an allure, and I guess this is a bit of a trend here. And Kane kind of did handpick where he went last year with the New York Rangers around the deadline. And is he like an original six only kind of guy or what? I mean, this is his third team, all original six. But no, I also think that the travel is a huge part of it with the surgery and everything. We talked about how like Dallas, for my money, would have been a great spot. I got to watch Dallas live last night, and those Stars are ridiculously talented. But again, they have the worst travel in the National Hockey League, and that's obviously something to weigh in when you're 35 and you've made as much money as Patrick Kane. This was a decision based with, I would imagine, money was like the fifth or sixth thing that was discussed. He wants to win. He's had that taste in his mouth before, but also like 3-time Cup champ, but hasn't even really sniffed it in the last like half decade or more. So I'm thinking that for him, he thinks Detroit's got a chance to be that team. Now, do I think that team? Probably not, but Wings fans have been rightfully criticizing my takes on them all the year so far. They're in a good spot right now, third in the Atlantic Division. Now Tampa is coming. I know they've lost 2 straight, but Vasilevsky, once he gets his feet under him, Tampa's coming.
That'll be fun.
Toronto can rile off 5-6 wins in a row. So those things in particular, I think, are cause for concern. But at the same time, I always like looking at goal differential this time of year because, teams have played such a different, vast variety of games, but plus minus in goals does matter to me. And they're plus 14 right now. Like they've been dominant in a lot of their wins. Florida's only plus 7 right now, but they've figured it out of late. They look real good, real competitive, real like gritty as we saw them make their run to the Stanley Cup final last year. But yeah, I would say I'm mildly surprised, Mikey, but we knew that they were always going to be in the mix. And certainly I think it was a better decision than going to Buffalo. We've seen Buffalo. Yeah, they got the 5-1 win in New York last night against the Rangers. But I think that it probably came down to Florida and Detroit is my guess. And Florida really would have had to make a squeeze to allow him to fit in at 2.75. Whereas Detroit.
Did that surprise you? Did that surprise you too, to see that number come in? I mean, it's not high, like that's what he's worth, but you figure if he's a guy who wants to win, then maybe he could have. He could have taken a league veteran minimum deal to go to Florida if they have a better chance to win. Like, he didn't have to sign for nearly $3 million.
Do you think that a part of it maybe is like he's pretty much guaranteed, especially with the history, like he's going to play on a line with Larkin and DeBrincat, right?
Oh, for sure. That was the carrot there was, hey, we're going to put you back with Alex DeBrincat. Like that.
Well,
very
look
clearly.
Look at the right side in Florida. It's like Sam Reinhart, who's having an unbelievable contract year, and Matthew Tkachuk. Like, it's not as easy. I know one of them could probably move over to the left, but there's, I think, more of a natural fit in the lineup for Detroit.
Yeah, for sure. No, it makes a lot of sense from a Detroit perspective, obviously, to bring him into the fold, and you're going to get your money's worth at that type of contract for sure, I think. And it's smart for them not to go multi-years. Like, there's a report maybe he would sign a multi-year deal, but I mean, you just don't know what you're going to get from Patrick Kane, so kind of smart to go 1 year at a time with him at this point. But yeah, like he's going to help this team. Is he going to put him in a cup contending status? I personally don't believe so, but he is going to be a help and should give them, some much needed offense outside of just DeBrincat and Larkin.
I'm really looking forward to seeing how things unfold. Now, Patrick Kane is skating with the Detroit Red Wings as of this morning. However, he's not quite ready to return to the
I
lineup.
saw I saw a report. I'm trying to see if I can recall who it was from, but a report that said he's looking at about 7 to 10 days before making his debut with Detroit. So about a week to 10 days before we see him in action.
Which would, in potential, to have him play against his hometown team in Buffalo. The Red Wings are there on December 5th. Kind of unfortunate that he's not in the lineup right away because Detroit's next two games are the two other teams that Patrick Kane has played for. They are playing at New York Rangers next and then home to Chicago the following game. Obviously not the same rivalry as when they were both in the same division, but with Chicago and Detroit, when it's two original six teams, I mean, that's an all-time jersey matchup. Like this Patrick Kane, I think I saw Chicklets or someone online. They're like, that's a pretty nice closet full of jerseys he's got right now with Chicago Rangers and the Detroit Red Wings now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, actually though, like those are some sweet sweaters, obviously, and three original six franchises, and yeah, he's had a pretty good career, and that's a decent trio to be affiliated with.
Yeah, no doubt. So we'll see what kind of impact Patrick Kane has with the Detroit Red Wings. We mentioned the Red Wings, though. Red hot, 11,
Yeah.
6, and 3 through 20 games on this season. Now, 11 wins in 20 games. You're looking at 50-50, but they did get those 3 overtime wins. They erased a 4-goal deficit against Ottawa for one of those points. And they could just be hitting their stride here. I still look for them as a team that you probably want to be giving up a little less than 60 goals in 20 games. That's an average of 3 per game, but you can always nitpick things. And the Detroit Red Wings fan base has to be happy with where they're at, with still Seaman Edvinson and others coming up through the ranks. Coming up after the break, the Boston Bruins, the team that never seems to go away, is having a little bit of a rough patch. Is it something to be critical of, or is it just as you'd expect through the season? There'll be times when you win, there'll be times when you lose. We'll discuss that next. And also a reminder that for more on Patrick Kane to the Detroit Red Wings, why don't you go check out Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley, our great hosts over at Locked On Red Wings. They've got you covered with everything you need to know over there. Okay, let's get to the Boston Bruins next. You're listening to Locked On NHL.
Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast, where we have local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week, not only in the NHL, but around the sporting world. And if you want all of our great content on the network in one place, head on over to Locked On Sports Today, where we have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365-day per year live stream with all of the Locked On podcasts going. It's a great network to be a part of. We're happy to be here on your Wednesday Locked On NHL. We cover the Eastern Conference. On Tuesdays, we got the Western Conference covered. Thursdays are power rankings. We've got different themes for every day. But one thing you know for sure is every day when you wake up, you know there will be a new Locked On NHL podcast in your feed. Local experts on the biggest stories. It's all here on the Locked On NHL Podcast Network. Okay, so we talked Patrick Kane with the Detroit Red Wings. The Atlantic Division, though, runs through the Boston Bruins, just like it has over the last number of years. I guess Tampa could probably say a little something about that, But still, the Boston Bruins, the class of the Atlantic to start this season, still in first place, 31 points in 21 games. They're third in the National Hockey League, second in points, tied with the New York Rangers. But when you look at this Boston Bruins team, is there reason to be concerned with the way they've lost these last 3 games?
Like, it's hard to say yes, but they've gotten blown out in these games. Like, you look at their let's say last 5 games, they gave up 5 to the Lightning, and then pretty good win against the Panthers, 3-1. But then since then, their last 3, they lose 5-2 to Detroit, 7-4 to the Bruins, and 5-2 to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Like, those are pretty big, discrepancies there in terms of the score. So I was curious to see, okay, is this because just bad puck luck? Is this just, law of averages equaling out? Or no, are we just not getting the same level of play out of the Boston Bruins? So you look at the last 5 games, and actually the underlying numbers don't look great for the Bruins. You look at the expected goal differential between these for this team, 43%. 43% expected goal differential over the last 5 games and that ranks 27th in the National Hockey League. And it's not like they're playing the best teams in the NHL right now. So yeah, I think there is some, concern that maybe this team, we all anticipated them to take some steps back, and it took a little bit longer, but perhaps it's finally starting to come. A big difference between, what we're seeing with this team now too is the amount of goals that they've given up, obviously, given up 5 spots in 3 of their last 5 games.
Well,
Or
4
4
because
of the
they
last.
gave up 7.
Yeah, 4 of their last 5 games, they've given up 5+ goals, but they're giving up a lot of scoring chances at a much higher rate than they were prior, and the expected goals against is a lot higher than it was. 3.5 expected goals against, so not getting the defending that they were getting either. I wonder how much of that is we expected that without Patrice Bergeron. Is it finally starting to kind of creep up here?
Well, one thing they could do immediately to improve is get some penalty killing acumen. They've allowed 4 power play goals against in their last 3 games. Their penalty kill has given up 5 in their last 22 attempts
Tough.
during this tough stretch where they've lost in overtime to the Tampa Bay Lightning, in regulation to the Red Wings, Rangers, and Blue Jackets. They did beat the Florida Panthers by a score of 3-1 on the road last week. So I'm of the mind that their goaltending's too good to continue down this path. I think we're going to see Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark get them out of this as a tandem, just like they've been able to do over the course of the last little while. Now, it was Ullmark in a couple of those games, maybe not living up to, the ability that he's shown time and time again that he can play at, especially the the Rangers game, rather. I know he gets 40 shots, but an .825 save percentage is you just can't have that. And
No.
I mean, we saw it in last season over and over again, and even early this season, that like they thrive off of this shared responsibility between the two of them. So I think we're gonna see, in what better way to get out of a slump. And I know they're playing better, but they've got the San Jose Sharks tomorrow night, and I don't want to say that the Bruins are gonna smell blood. I don't want to. That's pretty lame going to the shark pun, but I do think that this is kind of coming at the perfect time for them, because we've seen them kind of take a half step back, but at home against San Jose, like, not only is it a must win, but it's like a must blowout. Like, you should be winning this game if you're Boston, like 6-1, 5-0. Just go out there and be like, okay, we're asserting our dominance here, because then they've got at Toronto. That's a game I'm sure they have circled right now. And then they come home. Look, there's no easy game in the NHL, but their next 2 home games are San Jose and Columbus. Then Buffalo, who hasn't been playing very good. And then Arizona, who has been playing good. Right. So now they've lost in Columbus. What better time than to be like, okay, it's a home and home. So now you're coming to our barn, TD place, and let's see what goes on there, the TD Garden. So I'm going to be very curious and watching closely for the Boston Bruins, but I've been burned far too many times in the past saying that they're taking a step back, that they're going to have to really drop off before I'm ready to say that there's trouble in paradise. They're still in first place in the division. They're still in tie for second place in the NHL. Like, they'll be fine. They're the Boston Bruins.
For sure. I mean, they'll probably I mean, they're going to make the playoffs. Like, I think they got off to such a great start, but I mean, I don't know if that division spot is completely locked up, like maybe you would have said a couple of weeks ago, just because they are starting to show some, some cracks in the armor here. And I got to tell you, like when I do look at the numbers, they're generating a heck of a lot less than they were earlier in the season. And the defending has not been quite where it was. Like, this is a team that has, over the last 5 years been probably one of the, if not the, best defending team in the NHL. And you look at their last 5 games where they've really struggled here. They've allowed 5 goals in 4 of those 5 games. Why? Well, because they've been the 3rd worst defending team with a 3.54 expected goals against per 60. So the process hasn't been good either, which is what is concerning. If it was, just some bad goaltending or some bad puck luck, okay. But the process hasn't been there for the last, well, ever since Milan Lucic got, that situation. That's kind of when this team started to lose it a little bit. I'm not saying that that's the reason or there's a linkage between them, but you look at, when that situation occurred and this 5-game span we're looking at, those do correlate, but not that they together correlate.
Ian McLaren has been doing a great job over at Locked On Boston Bruins, breaking down the highs and lows of what's been an eventful season in Beantown. Coming up on the other side, the Eastern Conference is just loaded this year comparatively. In the Western Conference, there are 5 teams still in the teens in points, while in the East, there's only 2. And like I've been complaining about all show, all week, all month long, the Senators haven't even played 18 games yet. So we can put a little asterisk before, but the East is super strong right now. What does that mean going into this next stretch of games before Christmas? We'll discuss next. You're listening to Locked On NHL. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. The beauty of the Game Time app is it's last-minute tickets, kind of like life these days, right? Everything used to be so planned out. Well, now, in the era of phones, plans can change in a minute. And buying tickets to your favorite events has never been this easy. With Game Time, it's fast, it's easy, and they have killer deals on last-minute tickets with their best price guarantee. How about that? That's probably my favorite part of the app, is that you get tickets with the picture where you're going to be watching. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll get the best price too. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Get exclusive flash deals like I got last night. I went to go see Winnipeg play against Dallas. I got great seats, man. 3rd row up right there. I was the goal line judge basically, and we were having a great time. $80 Canadian to sit that close to the action. 2 great teams. You can too. Go check it out, gametime.com. And because you're a listener of Locked On NHL, you can use the code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Welcome back, Locked On NHL. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Mike DiStefano. We call this the Battle of Ontario edition of Locked On NHL. He's with Locked On Maple Leafs. I'm with Locked On Senators. We have local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week all across the Locked On NHL channel. And what I love most is if your favorite team is playing, you can go check out that host, but also go check out the hosts of the teams that you're playing against, because nobody's as dialed in with nobody has anybody to answer to here on Locked On NHL. We're not burying any narratives. We're just telling it like it is here as best as we can on the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Mikey. So the Eastern Conference, we're 20 games in, give or take. Where are you how are you feeling about the disconnect between the East and the West this year? Like, am I crazy to notice just the disparity? It feels more than usual.
Well, yeah, and I think we kind of expected that a little bit going into the year. I mean, we've known that this Metro division was going to be tough, and it was going to be, a lot of real good teams, and it was going to be difficult to win. Same with the Atlantic, with the Detroits and the Buffaloes and Ottawas, thinking that they're going to have a good season. You've got Florida and Boston hanging around, Toronto, Tampa. Like, you just look at every single team in the Eastern Conference, and outside of, I don't know, maybe Montreal and Columbus, like every other team seems to have a chance to make the playoffs. I think you can't say that when it comes to the Western Conference. Like Chicago, they're not making the playoffs. San Jose, they're not making the playoffs. You got the Ducks, who finally are coming back down to life, back down to earth. They lost 7 straight. They're not making the playoffs either. So there's just a lot of teams that aren't very good. They're definitely in rebuild mode out west. Whereas, we've seen a lot of these teams in the Eastern Conference kind of put together some squads and will remain competitive going forward. I expect for this to be kind of the same throughout the rest of the season.
6 of the bottom 7 teams in terms of point percentage in the National Hockey League come from the Western Conference, only
Eh,
the Columbus Blue Jackets in the East.
Who just beat the Boston Bruins. So
Anybody can beat anybody in this league, but if we go to the conference, the Eastern Conference, here we go. In terms of points, there we go, 1 through 15, all on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. It's a little tough there. Hey, should I cut off the bottom couple teams here or what? What sucks? I've actually ironically already cut off the Senators by accident.
well, I mean, you talked
Ah,
about them enough on Locked On Sens,
no, I do.
realistically. I
Well,
mean, you look at a couple of these teams, though, like Pittsburgh, New Jersey, you expect for those guys to rank, to rise to the ranks. It's funny. There's one team. Look at that. The Pittsburgh. You talked about goal differential being telling for you. If you look at the goal differential, the Pittsburgh Penguins, yeah, they're a 500 team, plus 10 though in the goal
well,
differential
so they're
category.
even if you take out their game against San Jose.
True, I guess. Yeah, I guess you put a little context behind things, and it tells a different story. Like, what are we working with? Facts here? Come on now.
Can't let those get in the way of a good narrative. But look, all in all, like to focus on the Metropolitan Division here, we knew that Carolina would get out of their mini slump, right? They
Yeah,
were allowing so many goals to start the season, but their calling card has always been strong defensive hockey and strong
yeah.
stick checks. And you knew that they would figure it out. So they have. But to me, it's like the Philadelphia Flyers are still just puttering along here, and they haven't had that major drop off that people were expecting. The
No,
Metro to me is so fascinating because the New Jersey Devils were expected to be a top 3 team. I mean, they're very close, right? Like 3 through 7 in the Metro are very tight. And we're recording this before Wednesday's games, only a couple of games this Wednesday night. So we're not worried about too
major
exact there
shakeup.
going forward. But even still, like to me, Philly and Washington are the biggest question marks in the Eastern Conference. I
Yeah.
can't really pinpoint based on what I'm seeing from them. I can't pinpoint where they're going to finish the year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'd throw the Islanders into that discussion as well. Like all
No, I
three of
know
those
the Islanders
teams.
stink. The Islanders stink.
Well, I thought the Washington Capitals stunk too, and then they won like 6 games in a row. So I don't know that to be the fact anymore. But
The Islanders
look,
have 8 wins in 21 games.
yeah. Yeah. Well, they're not getting goaltending though. Like what happens when Ilya Sorokin comes back to life? Like that's their bread and butter. They're not a goal scoring team. Look at that, 67 goals allowed. That's not what you typically see when it comes to New York Islanders. So they get a save and Sorokin comes back to being the top 3 goaltender he is. Who knows? Could be a different story for New York.
And then in the Atlantic Division, so the Tampa Bay Lightning, they get Andre Vasilevsky back and stick taps to Jonas Johansson. That's a tough spot for him to be put in as a guy who had never really shown the ability to be a starter at the NHL level. The numbers weren't great, right? Like he finished
Dude,
off that
though,
stretch 18 games and an 894 save percentage. But
did you see the amount of work that he's had though since going? No one has faced more rubber and more high danger rubber than Jonas Johansson this season in the NHL. Like if you
well,
go
and
to NHL
also
Edge, you go look at NHL Edge, their new analytics site that they put out there, and you look at shots against and then high danger shots against. Jonas Johansson has the most. The most saves, the most
Interesting.
shots against. He has been the busiest goaltender in the National Hockey League this season.
So on that note, I think it's kind of funny, and it's having fun with small sample sizes as well. But the Tampa Bay Lightning best goalie this year in terms of save percentage is still Jonas Johansson. Andre Vasilevsky's allowed 5 goals in his first 2 games, has an 891 save percentage, and Matt Tompkins has an 889.
Both bums.
Oh man, Vasilevsky, above, over, under a 915 save percentage this year. Probably over.
He was under that last year, if I'm not
He was
mistaken.
at it.
Yeah,
915 last year. He's never in his since he was 21 years old, he's never been under 915.
I'm gonna take the under. I'm going to take the under here because scoring is up. So we're just seeing that happen. And look at the stat that I just laid out to you. Jonas Johansson, the busiest goaltender, seeing the most rubber and seeing the most high danger chances of any other goalie. That's now going to obviously come down on Vasilevsky. Now, can he make those saves? Absolutely. But you look at the last couple of years, this has been a thing that has kind of plagued Tampa for the last 2 years. Vasilevsky has been able to mask those defensive deficiencies, but coming off an injury might take a little bit to get there. I think it comes in slightly below. I'm thinking like a 913 save percentage.
Okay, sticking with Tampa, Nikita Kucherov, already a Hall of Famer, right?
No doubt, first ballot, no doubt.
Is he the most underrated player in the league right now?
Yeah.
Like he's never in the conversation of top 3, top 5 players in the league.
Well, and then he is like the problem with Kucherov. A couple of years ago, he won a Hart, and then he was known as a top 5 player for sure. Like I think he's been on a lot of top 5 lists, but then he'll have a season where he'll have an injury or he'll miss time for injury, and then he kind of gets forgotten about. I think that's his problem. Like he hasn't put together enough full 82 game seasons in a row where he's been able to like year after year dominate, consecutive seasons. But whenever he does play, the dude does nothing but produce. Like 37 points in 22 games. Like that's not quite, Connor McDavid status from last year, but dude's going to probably flirt with, what do you have that one year? 128 points or something like that. I mean,
I got it right here. Yeah, 128. He had 87 assists in 82 games.
I mean, he's got 22 and 22, so he's kind of very closely on par.
He had 83 and 82 last year at 113 points. Like this guy, he is unreal. He's such a player. Like he had those 2 back-to-back playoffs where he had 34 and then 32 points when they won their 2 cups. Like in those 2 playoffs,
Are you kidding me?
What?
Are you kidding me?
Dude, in those 2 playoffs, he had more points than a lot of NHL players have in their careers. He had 48 games, 66 points. This is in the playoffs. This is in Stanley Cup Finals. This guy is he needs some more respect on his name here. And
I agree.
Obviously, like the defensive side of his game isn't as prevalent, but it doesn't matter. So good at hockey, and he's leading the league now in points. And funny enough, there's only a couple Eastern Conference players in the top 5. We've got 3 players from the West, 2 Vancouver Canucks, JT Miller, Quinn Hughes are 2nd and 3rd, and then Cale Makar is 4th, and then David Pasternak just doing his thing, 31 points in 21 games.
Crazy is that 50% of the top 4 scorers are defensemen.
That's amazing. I love it, man. These guys got to grow up on watching Erik Karlsson do his thing, man.
Hey, you know what? Like they did technically. So man, it's fun to watch. And if you watch, like I've watched a lot of Vancouver games this year, Quinn Hughes is so fun to watch, and he can defend too. Like he's actually a solid 2-way defenseman. For the longest time, I think like him and Hronek in terms of goals against per 60 were leading the league among all blue liners. So like, yeah, he's unbelievable right now. My front runner for sure for the what do they call defenseman of the year again?
The Norris.
Yeah, I was thinking Selke. I'm like, that's defensive forward, but the Norris. I think Hughes, man, like right now, he's that's my guy.
So Connor McDavid is all the way back as well, right? Like we're seeing him doing his thing. Last night they get a 5-4 win over the Vegas Golden Knights. I know that's out west, but don't worry, I'm getting to a question here. Now, last night did McDavid have much? McDavid had a goal and 2 assists. Yeah, shocker. So McDavid has 12 points in his last 3 games.
Decent night for McDavid, 3 points. It's okay.
12 points in his last 3 games. How long until he's leading the league in scoring?
Oh man, what's he got here? Okay, so
28.
he's 9.
He's tied for 10th.
He's 9 shy with a
Tied for
game.
9th.
He's got a couple games, in hand too, where you could. He missed a couple games due to injury. Now I think about it, so he's probably not many in hand.
Well, 2 because Draisaitl has 21.
Yeah.
Like next week.
I think he finishes. I mean, not next week, no. But by All-Star break, I think he could definitely be leading in the race by All-Star break for sure for the Art Ross.
Unreal. We'll go check out Locked On NHL Western Conference Edition every Tuesday. We're here 5 days a week on the Locked On Podcast Network for Mike DiStefano with
Christmas.
Locked On.
I'm changing it to Christmas. I'm going aggressive by Christmas.
Okay, well, we'll hold you to that. Next week, we're going to be in person. Mikey and I will be recording in person, so stay tuned for that and more. Until then, we pass it on to Power Rankings. Thanks for staying tuned to another edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast, your team every day.